Welcome, listeners. You found Blerd on the Street, where three black women talk about fandom, pop culture, and current events. Episodes will be posted twice monthly, so please come back for more. Check the show notes for content and spoiler warnings. Please keep yourself safe. Find us on Twitter at Blerd Street, that's BLERDSTREET, and on Instagram at Blerd on the Street. Thanks for listening.
Hi, I'm Jillian. A matcha latte and my Nintendo Switch are never far from my reach. You can find me at jillian.corinne on Instagram.
Hi, my name is Jenna, and I think coffee, books, and makeup are life. You can follow me on Instagram at PhillyGirlJL or on TikTok at PhillyGirlJLH.
Hi, I'm Lily, and I run on flat whites and raspberry scones. You can find me on Twitter at AliseOnLife. That's ALISEONLIFE.
We're discussing Loki episodes 4 and 5 today. And Lily is regaling us of her, if she was stuck in a time jail on a time loop, what would she not want to have to relive over and over again? Like Loki being kicked by Sif so many times. I feel bad for him because he was so excited when she came on screen. He was like, Sif! Oh my God, girl, hey!
I know, right? He was all like, yes, someone I know.
Yeah, someone from Asgard. Get me out of here.
Like Thor in Ragnarok, where he's like, we work together. We're friends from work. We're
friends.
So,
yeah.
Ready to talk about our Loki? Today, we are going to be discussing Loki episode 4, which is the Nexus event, and Loki episode 5, Journey into Mystery. So, right off when Loki gets put into the time jail, and he has to repeat that scene over and over with Sif, which I thought that was fantastic that they even chose Sif. Like, one would think that maybe Loki would not want to be in a scene that repeated over and over again that involved Thor. But no, they drilled down into what Loki really wouldn't want over and over, and that's someone like devaluing him, I suppose.
And you're always going to be alone.
Right.
And you deserve this. And then I remember in one part he's like, oh, I remember after this I took a bath and had a glass of wine. I never thought of it again. I'm like, you're a liar.
Exactly. Right? Like that definitely sounds like when somebody when secretly it's like, oh no, I'm living rent free in your head. Totally.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was interesting though how happy he was to see Sif.
Yeah, I know. He's like, Sif!
Right. Like, considering their history, you wouldn't think that he would have been like, oh, hey, it's Sif. Hey, girl.
Yeah. Right. And then he's like, she wasn't, or Jamie Alexander, the actress, she wasn't in Ragnarok.
Right.
Think. So everybody else was killed by Hela, I believe.
Yes.
Spoilers. I'm sorry. Spoilers. It's been out for a few years. It's on Disney Plus.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not sure that we could call it spoilers at this point. But
I will put in the show notes that we'll be discussing other MCU stuff that has come out.
Yeah. So yeah, when he was like, Sif, hey girl.
Well,
so excited.
But it could also be perhaps just that Sif is a part of Asgard, right? So he's he's able to have that.
Right. Like it's some kind of connection.
Mm-hmm. He and Thor watched it get destroyed.
Right.
Asgard. So I can see that.
Yeah, but this Loki only saw that on the video.
Oh,
remember?
Right.
He
hasn't seen this yet.
I'm sorry. You're right. Well, I mean, I guess he knows it gets destroyed, but you're right.
Right.
Never mind.
But it would be like, the thing is that because he only watched it on the video, he didn't experience it. And he also knows that it's in the future. He can just pretend it didn't happen. And then seeing Sif is like, yeah, I mean, of course, Asgard's still around. Here's Sif.
Right. But anyway, I find it interesting, Lily, you had some sort of math thing that you did. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, just because I don't even know why I did it, to be honest. I just decided, like, hey, this is what I'm going to do while I'm watching this episode. And then I actually had to rewind the episode and play it, and then rewind and play it several times just to get the right, what's it called on that? Timing.
The right calculation. Oh.
Yeah. So basically that scene with him and Sif from start to finish takes 23 seconds, which, wow, if you are in a time loop, every 23 seconds, like they couldn't even make it like a whole minute or something. 23 seconds, like I would just be tired of it after the first couple ones. I'd probably just take a seat and be like, all right, go ahead. You go ahead and act that out. But
no
wonder you didn't want to go back in there.
Yeah. And it's always like in the same place that he gets it. So tender.
Yeah. Like, we don't really know how long Mobius left him in there. Could have been all day.
Right, but time passes differently in the TVA, so
that's true.
Right. We don't even know.
Right. Maybe no time at all passed.
Maybe. Because it's like a separate little jail from the
rest of the
TVA. Because they open like a little portal thing.
Right. So like here's Loki repeating this over and over and over again. But for like everyone else, it's been like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Oof.
I know. Yes, exactly.
Can we talk about, there's a couple things that Sylvie says, because in this episode we find out her Nexus event and when she was captured. So she was a little girl playing with her toys, and the hunters come and grab her and say, like, you've committed crimes against the timeline, which we could have a whole conversation about that, because how is anyone supposed to know that they've committed a crime?
Like a child, right?
Yeah. Like, but even an adult, like, you've committed crimes against the timeline. How do you plead? I'm like, you haven't actually explained anything to me.
Mm-hmm.
There was one part that Sylvie said to Loki. She said, the universe wants to escape, so it creates chaos. And then later she says, I'm not supposed to exist. So it's interesting because we're getting into this later, the multiverse, as part of phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So, and we know that, well, technically we don't know in this episode, but there's a bunch of different multiverses. But this is like the prime timeline. So it's interesting that's like, oh, the universe wants to escape. Escape what? What is she talking about? So it creates chaos. So she being Sylvie is born the goddess of mischief. But that's not the prime timeline, because we know that Loki is supposed to be the god of mischief, and everything that has happened up to this point in the Marvel Cinematic Universe was quote unquote supposed to happen. So I just thought it'd be interesting to talk about that and like identity, or a crisis of identity maybe. And like she still exists because she is in it's interesting. Like, okay, she exists, but she's like not really in the world. She's hiding in these apocalypses throughout time. And I wanted to hear your thoughts before I go off on a jumble of and confuse our listeners. I wanted to hear you guys' thoughts because I'm having trouble getting mine together.
So, with the identity thing, this is maybe tangentially related, but when you were just saying this now, I was thinking of how the different multiverses keep being created, right? Outside of this primary timeline that they are trying to do. And that could echo the idea of humans having free will, right? Like they're trying to control and keep this one timeline, the only timeline that exists, but the different multiverses keep cropping up because humanity always wants to have free will.
Right, and then there was one point, I think in episode 1, where Mobius said, or no, not Mobius, it was that video that they showed when Loki was like in line waiting for judgment, I guess. The weird cartoon with Miss Minutes said like, oh, if you like, oh, you're late to work today, so you created a Nexus event. Or like, I think Mobius at one point in this episode says like, oh, when the Nexus event happens between Loki and Sylvie, like, and it starts to branch off on the timeline they're watching on that TV, he's like, oh, that's not someone stepping on the wrong leaf. I'm like, this is so finicky.
Yeah.
Like, I could step on a leaf and, you know, you're probably not intentionally stepping on a bunch of leaves if you're just, like, walking down the street. And then suddenly, like, these people come out and, like, you've got a crime against the timeline. We're arresting you. Like, whoa, dude.
Right.
I'm just walking.
I also feel like they don't even really say that. Sometimes they're just like, boom, bang you up and take you away through the portal.
Yeah, and then it's interesting because it's like, okay, Sylvie, they said that she wasn't supposed to be born the goddess of mischief, but she's like a young girl, you know, maybe 10, 8 to 10, and she's like, now she's created this Nexus event. I don't, it's interesting how they like pick and choose these Nexus events.
Right.
Like, I don't get it.
Right. I mean, I think a lot of, here Lily goes again, making it about race, but I think a lot of this comes down to these stories that get told, and, you know, they're mostly probably white people in the writer's room, in the production, and all of that, where it's these things like the whole creating a Nexus event is like the same thing that happens in real life to people of color, where it's like, oh, well, we've accomplished something, but then the white hegemony keeps saying, oh, well, actually the goalpost is back here now, so you actually have to get here instead. And then when we get there, then they're like, well, you know what, it's over here to the right or whatever. Like the goalposts keep moving, and you can never actually get what it is that they want because you don't know what and where the goalposts are supposed to be. Right. And that's the same thing with the Nexus events. Like they could say anybody creates a Nexus event. They don't actually even have to have done something wrong. The TVA can just show up, kidnap you, reset your timeline, and that's it.
Right. It's
You know?
arbitrary, right?
Very arbitrary.
Well, I'm looking at two of the writers are people of color.
Okay.
But they're not black, but they are people of color.
Okay.
I mean, I think the whole point about this is that they do decide when the Nexus events are, and that they are, I guess in a sense, they're supposed to be like helping the world or whatever, but you know, you never know. What if that Nexus event actually ends up being something really positive, but they've interrupted that because they've taken with the person away, thinking that the Nexus, to me, it always feels like they assume that the Nexus event is going to be something negative. And I don't know if that's just based on how what happened with, I don't want to ruin like the end of the series, but like in the end, you kind of find out why the whole TVA was created, and maybe the underlying feeling of the Nexus events always being negative and always being something that has to be stopped has to do with, why the TVA was created in the first place.
Right. It's just interesting that I just thought it was really interesting that she said the universe wants to escape.
Right.
But she also didn't know why the TVA was created until the last episode.
Right.
So it was very interesting to me going back and watching it before we recorded that she would have said that at all.
Right.
And then also, like, with her identity, she had, developed to the point where she would have memories, maybe a personality, and then all of a sudden it's ripped away, but she was never supposed to be born. So it's interesting how they just took her when she's like 8 or 9 or 10.
But was she not supposed to be born, or was something not supposed to happen at that moment of her life?
She said, I'm not supposed to exist.
But that could just be her existing as the goddess of mischief, not her existing as a person.
Oh, okay. So I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I always saw it as that she wasn't supposed to be the goddess of mischief, and not specifically that she wasn't supposed to be a human at all, or, whatever.
Yeah, I think I saw it as she wasn't supposed to be a Loki. That's how I read that.
Right.
Okay. I didn't think of that. Because, like, we look at, like, Loki, and he's, like, the most arrested variant. They mentioned that, I think, in the second episode, that he's, like, then they show a bunch of, like, projections of different Lokis, but they're all, like, adult men.
Right.
So it was just like, oh, Loki just, like, decided to do something weird, and they're like, oh, that wasn't supposed to what you're supposed to be doing right now, so we're going to take you. But, yeah.
Yeah, I did find it interesting that there was only one variant that was female. Like, Sophie was the only variant that was female, or at least the only variant that they showed. Like, they had all different. I mean, and there are, okay, spoilers here. There is another kid Loki, but he's male, right?
Right.
And that was something interesting. Like she said, I wasn't supposed to be born, or I wasn't supposed to exist. But even with the other Lokis, like most of them, except for the kid Loki and maybe the alligator, because we don't know how old he is. The rest of them all reached adulthood at some point. Like they were all already adults. Before whatever they did created this Nexus event.
Right.
Well, yeah. But so maybe, I think actually you reminded me of that when you mentioned that she was a woman. So maybe it's not just that she wasn't supposed to be a Loki, it's that a Loki wasn't supposed to be a woman. Like, she's
Maybe that is the
only,
next event.
like, maybe that's the Nexus event.
Right, that's true. And maybe they only let her exist for as long as she did because she wasn't doing anything to create a new timeline, but then she got old enough and discovered, I guess, her powers, or maybe that's why they took her. Like that first point when she discovered her powers, they're like, well, now we can't have this.
Because in the time, if they had arrested all these other Lokis and they had done all this whatever, they had to know that MCU Loki existed and was there in the timeline. So they just sat there and watched and waited.
Yeah, that's something I don't get, because they say they meaning Ravonna and Mobius, they're talking in her office, and Ravonna asks him, like, you've seen all of time and all that has been and all that will be. When she asks him, like, where would you want to visit in the timeline? And I'm like, okay, so they've seen everything that is or will be or has been. So I'm still, like, so confused why they took her when she was just a young girl. Now we have a branch, and that story can't be written. And they never actually explain what happens when the branch reaches there's like a line that it can't reach.
Right.
They never explain what happens when something reaches that line. It's just always, oh, it's going to be bad.
Right.
Like, okay.
It's like in DC how they have Flashpoint.
Right.
Yeah. But they're also, like, okay with there being a multiverse. Like, Barry goes to visit, in the CW series, he goes to visit Kara Danvers, like, all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It's, like, cool. Yeah.
Well, maybe that's the problem right there. It's just that, like, hey, guys, take the broomsticks out of your butts and just let a multiverse exist.
I know, and that's, like, the other issue is, like, when they say, like, oh, well, these superheroes can't team up because they didn't have time to call each other. I'm like, you guys don't have, like anybody on your emergency contacts? You're like, hey, Iron Man, Captain America is in trouble with the government. Can you do an assist? Like, I bet Civil War wouldn't have happened.
Right.
But DC, they're like, oh, can you come help me? And then Superman's just like, zoop, okay, here we go. Where's the battle?
That's true. That is very true.
I find it interesting that the whole reason why the Nexus event, so to speak, for Loki was created was because of the Avengers, not him. Like, he took advantage of the fact that he could take the cube and go. But if the Avengers hadn't have done this whole going back in time to try and get the stone, that wouldn't have happened in the first place. So really, the Avengers created the Nexus event, not Loki. Perhaps we can move on to episode 5.
Okay.
And that is, what is it? Into the Mystery?
Journey into Mystery.
Journey into Mystery.
Yeah.
And so let's start with Jillian. You had some key points, I think.
Right. So when I was watching the episode, I think this is my third run watching it to take some more notes. I actually, speaking of identity, I was really struck by how the Lokis, like, describe themselves, and they keep asking, like, what makes a Loki a Loki? So I actually wrote down everything they said. And it's not. It's like 15 things. It's actually not that long.
But you have to read it in the Loki voices.
Oh, I don't know if I can. I got a really bad British accent. Okay, let me read these. Okay, so the Lokis, they survive. They always have a plan. They're overly sensitive. They have a glorious purpose. They're outcasts. They always escape. They're liars. They're cheats. They cut the throat of everyone that trusts them. they can't change. They're broken. They're green. They always have a game within a game. They betray, and they're defined by pain.
Okay.
So what's it? We're green?
When Mobius and the classic Loki are talking, they're like, how is the alligator Loki a Loki? And then the classic Loki says, well, he's green, isn't he? So I wrote that one down.
Well, I think the glorious purpose actually was mentioned more than once, not just on the, your list you were saying, but also as this concept that Loki carries around, is he always has a glorious purpose, and that's kind of part of him being Loki. So kind of let's discuss, because they never actually say what the glorious purpose of any of the Lokis are. I mean, I guess you can kind of assume for the classic Loki, the glorious purpose maybe was trying to save his homeland. I don't know, like, or at least save the people who live there. But yeah, let's hear what people's take on this glorious purpose is.
Yeah, I think the Loki of New York the Loki that we have as the main character in this show. I guess it would be 2012 Loki.
Or 2012, yeah.
I guess his glorious purpose would be to become the king of Asgard or ruler of Earth.
Maybe.
Yes, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's where he was trying to go.
Why does he have this glorious purpose? What is it? And is it just like Mobius said in the first episode, your purpose is to cause pain and suffering and make these other people always be great and find their, I guess, higher / glorious purpose.
Right.
And then they actually say in this episode, I mentioned that they can't change, but the kid Loki actually says every time one of us tries to change, the TVA grabs us.
Right.
Like tries to change and be better, or maybe like a non-villain of a story. The TVA grabs them. In every comic book, there's always a villain.
Right. But it's also interesting that they would snatch this, 2012 Loki, because he was being a villain by taking the cube and disappearing. So
I think that's why they had to, and I also think that Loki's maybe not a villain, but just a nemesis, right?
Right.
That one that like pops up everywhere, and that's why they had to do it here, the cube notwithstanding, because anything beyond this point, Loki has actually started on his arc of, I don't want to call it redemption, but he becomes a different person, and it starts in 2012.
His motivations are totally different in Thor Ragnarok. Like, he's not the villain of that movie.
And I mean, the thing is that Thor sort of effortlessly is adored, right?
Right.
Like, it doesn't really seem like Thor does much for that adoration, but Loki always has to work for it.
And he's always leaving. Thor always leaves, too.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. I mean, that's a point in the movie, is that while he is off fighting in the other realms, then Loki kind of steps in and is like, hey, I'm your leader now, even though he wasn't Loki, he was pretending to be his father. I think there was another point you wanted to bring up about this episode as well, besides the glorious purpose.
Yeah, the very obvious Wizard of Oz references.
Yeah.
Which in this one, yeah.
And actually, I've kind of, from the beginning of the Loki show, was kind of picking up on how it seemed like it was kind of like a Wizard of Oz.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were kind of channeling Wizard of Oz. But especially in this episode when they're trying to find out like who's actually behind, and I got that like Yellow Brick Road.
Oh yeah, because the void that they're in is like the end of time.
Right.
So like they've been on this journey trying to get to the end, and then classic Loki literally conjures an emerald city,
Right.
or an emerald projection of Asgard to help distract Eliath, the smoke monster.
Whose name that they know, even
Mhm.
though he never told them that was his name.
I mean, yeah, exactly. I think I brought that up in another.
You did. Kid Loki called him Eliath, and Jenna had pointed out, like, how would they have known his name?
Right.
Yeah,
or their name.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know how they named, because even in the next spoilers for the next episode of this series, the last one, the He Who Remains guy never says the name Eliath. So I gave it like a quick Google, and Eliath is actually the brightest star in Ursa Major.
Oh, okay.
So it still doesn't help.
But let's take a minute just to recap the very end of the episode and how each one of us felt when we saw this this sort of group effort of classic Loki creating the distraction and Sylvie trying to enchant, and then Loki, 2012 Loki, MCU Loki, joining in to combine his powers.
Well, I thought it was very interesting how all the Loki variants, seem to have like a different take on his powers.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought, Loki saying, well, I can't help you out because I don't have that power. That kind of speaks to his vulnerabilities, because you would think with Loki, he's always like, I am the best, I can do everything. He wouldn't hesitate to be like, okay, well, I can do this. I can help Sylvie. But he's not. He's kind of, in the beginning, he's like, I don't have that power. I can't do it.
Right. And then she says, I think we're stronger than we realize.
Right.
Which is interesting. Because also, I guess this thing of free will, like, Loki only has certain powers in his timeline, so that's all he's supposed to have, but he actually has way more.
Each Loki
it's interesting that it's like,
each Loki had different powers.
Right.
Yeah. Which is interesting too. But they all should have the same powers because they're all the same.
I guess, on the surface, that would be it, is that they're all Lokis, so they should all have the same power, but they don't actually feel that way, kind of.
Right. They're also always like, well, we're alone. But like, they actually aren't. They all have each other.
Right.
Because I don't know, it's kind of sweet, but it's like, it's also like,
well, I feel like they can
only exist in this, like,
right,
in this void, the purgatory thing at the end of the world.
They are, if you do look at it, like, they are alone because they're all Lokis. Like, it's not,
right.
They do have each other, but they're still all one person, I guess.
Yeah. And they also don't trust each other. So.
Right. No, not at all.
Because the Loki for president or whatever, I don't even know what he would be considered. But his name.
Yeah, I wonder is that Loki actually a president, or was he just running for president at the time he was pruned?
Oh, I think there's like a whole comic series about President Loki.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
I think all of the variants actually were pulled from the comic series.
Right.
Yeah.
Because even the like people laughed at the alligator Loki, but there actually is, there's not really an alligator Loki, but there actually is a comic series where Thor is an animal.
A frog.
Isn't he like a frog?
Yes, a frog.
Yeah.
He's a frog. So like it kind of makes sense that there could be an alligator Loki variant out there if there's a frog Thor.
A whole Asgard where everyone is amphibians.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly. But yeah, I kind of felt like it was very interesting how they all came together at the end. But it's not surprising to me in a sense, like you said, that they're all alone, but they do have each other, and you see that at the end where they kind of.
It was it, but it wasn't all of them, was it?
Like, no, it wasn't.
Kid Loki and Alligator Loki walked away.
Right, they did.
But he did give him his sword, which I thought was
right. But they walked away because they said they're not going to leave. Like this is their home.
Right.
I feel like in a sense maybe they've been there the longest, or
that's what I think they said.
Right.
They said he's the king here.
Yeah, like they don't know any other life as a variant outside of this wasteland.
Hi, it's Blerd Lily. That's all for the Blerd on the Street analysis of Loki Episode 4, The Nexus Event, and Episode 5, Journey into Mystery. If you're intrigued by the mention of what's seen in my life I'd not want to be stuck in time prison re-experiencing, keep an ear out for an announcement of the premiere of the Blerd on the Street Patreon. It'll be part of the bonus content we offer there. There's also a bonus audio scene right after this, so don't leave until the very end.
Microsoft Teams is doing something.
This is like their Halloween like trick.
Yeah.
No treats, just tricks.
Yeah. Who's excited for spooky season?
I mean,
at the time of this recording, it is early October, so the anticipation can only build from here.
Well, I've been excited since the start of September, which is honestly not September same. For me. It's pre-October.
Honestly, same. I put out my I have a doormat that says "Witches Gather Here." Oh wait, I have to show you my sweater. Hold on, the one that I'm wearing. It's the Grim Reaper and some lady, and the lady says, "I feel like death," and the Grim Reaper says, "You don't know me."
Yeah, I'm wearing my. I don't know if you can see it, but it says it's just a bunch of hocus pocus.
Oh, nice. Oh, I also got this. I also got this sweater.
Oh, I saw that in one of your photos, your pictures.
Serial killer documentaries and chill.
Yes, I like that. Thanks for listening to Blerd on the Street.